There is a certain stillness that can be imagined when thinking about New York in the early 1800s, though it is not the silence of emptiness, but rather the soft hum of a place becoming something new. If you listen closely, you might almost hear the gentle layering of footsteps, cartwheels, distant voices, and the low murmur of a city still learning how to be a city. It is not yet the towering, restless metropolis we know today. Instead, it is something slower, something uncertain, a place caught between what it was and what it would become. At first glance, one might picture a small cluster of buildings near the southern tip of Manhattan, surrounded by stretches of open land, uneven roads, and the quiet rhythm of the nearby water. Ships drift in and out of the harbor, their wooden frames creaking softly as they carry goods, people, and stories from distant places. The air smells faintly of salt, smoke, and damp earth. It is a place of arrival, but also of waiting. A place where time feels slightly stretched, as though the future has not yet fully arrived. And yet, beneath this calm surface, something deeper is unfolding. What was it like to live here then? Not just to pass through, not to visit for a brief moment, but to wake each morning and belong to this evolving place. This is the quiet mystery that lingers, because life in New York during the 1800s was not defined by a single experience. It was shaped by countless small moments, layered together like the sounds of a distant street that never fully fall silent. If you imagine standing on one of those early streets, perhaps made of packed dirt or uneven stone, you might notice how narrow they feel. Buildings rise modestly on either side, their wooden frames weathered by wind and seasons. Windows are small, sometimes slightly crooked. Doors open and close with a gentle creak. There is movement, but it is not hurried in the way modern movement feels. People walk with purpose, but also with patience. The city does not rush. Not yet. There is a rhythm to it, a quiet pulse. Morning arrives not with alarms or bright electric light, but with the slow change of the sky. Pale blue softens into gold. Light touches rooftops first, then slips down into the streets. People begin to stir. A door opens. Someone steps outside. Somewhere nearby, a cart begins to roll, its wooden wheels pressing softly into the ground. Voices follow, low, calm, unhurried. This is how the city breathes. But even in the early hours, there is a sense that something larger is taking shape. It can be felt in the way new buildings appear gradually, filling empty spaces. In the way ships arrive more frequently than before. In the way unfamiliar languages drift through the air, carried by those who have come from far away, bringing with them traditions, hopes, and uncertainties. New York, in the 1800s, is not yet fully formed. It is a place of transition, a place where identities are still being written, and perhaps that is what makes it so intriguing. Because to understand life here is not simply to observe what exists, but to notice what is changing. The subtle shifts, the small adjustments, the quiet adaptations people make as they learn to live together in a space that is growing more crowded, more complex, and more connected to the wider world. There are no towering skyscrapers yet casting long shadows across the streets. Instead, sunlight reaches more easily into the city, touching brick, wood, and glass. It reflects off windows. It warms the surfaces of buildings. It lingers on the faces of those who pause, even briefly, in their daily routines. Time moves differently here. Moments are not measured by speed, but by repetition. the opening of shops, the arrival of goods, the steady flow of people walking to and from their tasks. It is a rhythm built not on urgency, but on continuity. And within this rhythm, individual lives unfold quietly. A shopkeeper arranging items in a small storefront, a labourer preparing for a day of work near the docks, a family gathering around a modest table as morning light filters through a thin curtain. These moments are simple, almost ordinary, and yet, together, they form the foundation of something much larger. Because every action, no matter how small, contributes to the shaping of the city. It is easy, from a distance, to think of history in broad strokes, to imagine grand events, major decisions, and sweeping changes. But life in New York during the 1800s is not only about those larger movements. It is also about the quiet, steady accumulation of everyday experiences, the unnoticed details, the routines that repeat again and again, slowly building the character of the place. And so, if you continue to stand there observing, you might begin to notice how the city feels at different times of day. By mid-morning, the streets grow a little busier, more voices, more movement. The sounds overlap gently, creating a kind of layered texture that is never overwhelming, but always present. Horses move at a steady pace. Carts carry goods from one place to another. People pass each other with brief nods or quiet greetings. There is a sense of familiarity even among strangers. By afternoon, the light shifts again. Shadows stretch slightly longer. The pace softens just a little. Some people begin to return home. Others continue their work, their movement steady and practiced. The city does not stop. It simply changes its rhythm. And then evening arrives. It does not fall suddenly. It settles slowly, like a soft blanket over the streets. The light fades. Windows begin to glow faintly from within, lit by candles or lamps. The sounds of the day quiet down, though they never fully disappear. Somewhere, a voice continues. Somewhere, a door closes. Somewhere, footsteps echo lightly against stone. The city rests, but only partially. Even in stillness, it continues to exist, to breathe, to grow. And perhaps that is the most remarkable thing about New York in the 1800s. It is not defined by a single moment or a single identity. It is a collection of transitions, a place where past and future overlap gently, creating something that feels both familiar and unknown at the same time. For those who lived there, this was simply life, not a historical moment, not a story to be told centuries later, just the quiet unfolding of days, one after another, each shaped by routine necessity and the subtle awareness that change was always just beneath the surface. And yet, if we pause here, in this imagined stillness, we can begin to sense the deeper question that lingers beneath it all. What does it mean to live in a place that is constantly becoming something else? How do people adapt to change when it arrives, not all at once, but slowly, almost imperceptibly? And how does a city, made up of so many individual lives, begin to form a shared identity? These are questions that do not have simple answers. They are not solved in a single moment or by a single person. Instead, they unfold gradually, shaped by countless decisions, interactions, and experiences. In the early 1800s, New York is at the beginning of this journey. It is not yet the city of towering ambition and constant motion that we might imagine today, but the foundations are there, quietly forming, slowly expanding. And within those foundations are the lives of people who wake each day, step into the streets, and contribute in their own small ways, to the story of a city that is still discovering itself. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it, the soft rhythm of footsteps, the distant roll of wheels, the quiet murmur of voices blending together. It is not loud, not overwhelming, but it is steady, and it continues moment by moment, shaping the world that will come. As the morning light continues to settle over the young city, the streets of New York begin to reveal themselves more clearly, not as grand avenues, but as modest pathways shaped by necessity rather than design. They wind and curve in ways that feel almost organic, following old trails, property lines, and the quiet logic of earlier days when the city was smaller and less defined. There is no rigid grid yet stretching northward in perfect order, only a patchwork of routes that seem to grow as the city grows, adapting to the land and the needs of those who move across it. The ground beneath one's feet is uneven. In some places, it is packed dirt, worn smooth by countless footsteps and the steady passing of carts. In others, stones have been laid down, though not always evenly, creating a textured surface that shifts slightly with each step. After rain, these streets can become soft and heavy, holding puddles that reflect the sky in quiet, fleeting fragments. Movement slows then, as people choose their footing carefully, adjusting their pace to the rhythm of the earth itself. Buildings line these streets in a way that feels close and intimate. They are not tall by modern standards, rarely more than a few stories, but they stand near to one another, forming narrow corridors where sound travels easily and life feels shared. Many are made of wood, their surfaces weathered by wind, sun, and time. Others are built of brick, solid and steady, offering a sense of permanence in a place that is otherwise still changing. Their colors are muted, earth tones, soft reds, faded whites, blending gently into the landscape rather than standing apart from it. Windows are small, often framed with simple wood, and sometimes slightly uneven, as though each one carries its own quiet story of construction and care. Through them, glimpses of daily life can be seen. A curtain shifting in the breeze, a figure moving slowly inside, the soft glow of light reflecting against glass. These are not just structures, but spaces where life unfolds in quiet, continuous motion. Doors open directly onto the street in many places, creating a sense that the boundary between public and private life is thin, almost fluid. A person stepping outside becomes immediately part of the city's rhythm. There are no wide setbacks, no long walkways leading to distant entrances. Everything feels closer, more immediate. Conversations can begin with a glance, a nod, or the simple act of crossing paths. As one moves through these streets, there is a noticeable variation in their width and character. Some are slightly broader, allowing for the easier passage of carts and horses, while others narrow into almost intimate passages where only a few people can walk side by side. These narrower streets carry a different kind of energy. Sounds echo more softly. Movements feel more deliberate. There is a quiet awareness of proximity, of sharing space with others in a way that is both practical and unspoken. Above, the sky is visible in fragments, framed by rooftops that slope gently or rise in simple lines. Chimneys extend upward, releasing thin streams of smoke that drift and dissolve into the air. The scent of that smoke mixes with other subtle elements, the faint saltiness carried from the harbour, the earthy tone of wood and soil, and the occasional trace of cooking fires beginning their work for the day. The city, though modest in scale, feels layered. Each street holds its own character, shaped by the people who live and work there. Some areas are quieter, where the movement is slower and more predictable. Others feel slightly more active, with a steady flow of carts delivering goods, or individuals carrying items from one place to another. There is no overwhelming noise, but rather a consistent hum, a gentle blending of sounds that creates a sense of continuity. Near the waterfront, the atmosphere shifts subtly. The streets here feel more connected to the wider world, as ships arrive and depart with steady regularity. Wooden piers extend into the water, their surfaces worn smooth by time and use. The sound of water lapping gently against the sides of ships becomes part of the city's background rhythm, blending with the creaking of ropes and the occasional call of workers coordinating their tasks. Buildings near the docks are often more utilitarian in nature. Warehouses stand with wide doors and sturdy frames, designed to hold goods that come and go in an ongoing cycle. Their interiors are dimly lit, filled with the quiet presence of materials waiting to be moved, sorted, or traded. Outside, there is a sense of purpose in the movement of people, though it remains calm, measured, and unhurried. Moving slightly inland, the streets begin to reflect a different pace. Here, smaller shops appear, each one occupying a narrow space with a simple display facing the street. Items are arranged carefully, not in abundance, but with intention. A few goods placed just so, inviting a closer look. Shopkeepers stand or sit nearby, observing the flow of passers-by with a quiet attentiveness. There is no rush to attract attention. Instead, there is a steady presence, a quiet offering. The layout of the city, though not yet fully planned, begins to hint at future order. Certain paths become more traveled than others, gradually shaping themselves into primary routes through repeated use. These paths connect key areas, the docks, the markets, the places where people gather, and over time, they begin to define the structure of movement within the city. Yet even as this structure forms, there remains a softness to it. Nothing feels fixed beyond change. New buildings appear slowly, filling spaces that were once open. Old ones are adjusted, repaired, or replaced. The city is not static. It is in a constant state of gentle transformation, shaped by both intention and circumstance. As the day continues, light shifts across these streets, changing the way they are experienced. In the early hours, the light is soft and angled, creating long shadows that stretch across the ground. By midday, it becomes more direct, illuminating surfaces more fully and revealing details that might otherwise go unnoticed. The texture of brick, the grain of wood, the subtle wear on a well-used step. And then, as afternoon begins to lean toward evening, the light softens again, casting a warmer tone over everything it touches. The city feels quieter then, though it is not empty. Movement continues, but with a slightly slower rhythm, as though the day itself is gently winding down. In these moments, the streets seem to hold a kind of memory, not in a dramatic sense, but in the quiet accumulation of presence. Every step taken, every conversation shared, every cart that has passed. These moments leave subtle traces, shaping the feeling of the space even if they are not seen directly. It is here within these streets and structures that the early identity of New York begins to take form, not through grand design, but through repeated use, not through sudden change, but through gradual adaptation. The buildings, though simple, offer shelter and purpose, The streets, though uneven, provide connection. Together, they create a framework within which life can unfold day after day in ways that are both predictable and quietly evolving. And perhaps, if one lingers a little longer, there is a realization that begins to emerge. The city is not just a collection of physical spaces. It is a living environment shaped by movement, routine, and the presence of those who inhabit it. Every narrow street, every modest building, every worn step contributes to something larger than itself. A shared experience, a collective rhythm, a place that is slowly, steadily becoming more than the sum of its parts. And as this realization settles, gently and without urgency, it invites a deeper curiosity. What kind of lives fill these spaces? What routines take shape within these walls and along these streets? How do individuals navigate this environment, finding their place within a city that is still discovering its own form? These questions drift quietly, like the soft movement of air between buildings, waiting to be explored. Because beyond the streets and structures, beyond the physical shape of the city, there is another layer still unfolding, the daily life of the people who call it home. As the city settles into its shape each morning, it is not the buildings or the streets alone that give it meaning, but the quiet repetition of daily routines carried out by those who live within it. Life in New York during the 1800s unfolds not in grand gestures, but in small, steady patterns that repeat day after day, forming a rhythm that feels both predictable and deeply human. It is within these routines that the true character of the city begins to reveal itself, not loudly, but gently, like a story told in a low and steady voice. The day often begins early, guided more by natural light than by any fixed clock. As the first glow of morning touches the windows, people begin to stir within their homes. There is a softness to these early moments, a quiet transition from rest to wakefulness, a pause before movement begins. In some homes, a small fire is tended, its warmth slowly filling the space. In others, the simple sounds of preparation begin. A pot placed carefully, water poured, footsteps crossing wooden floors. There is no rush, but there is purpose. Each person moves according to a routine that has been shaped by necessity, by habit, and by the quiet expectations of the day ahead. A shopkeeper may rise with the intention of opening their door early, preparing their goods before the streets grow busier. A laborer may begin their morning with simple preparations, knowing that the day will require steady effort. A child may wake slowly, aware of the sounds of the household already in motion. These mornings are not identical, but they share a certain familiarity. Stepping outside, individuals become part of the larger rhythm of the city. The streets, which only hours before held a kind of stillness, begin to fill gradually with movement. It is not overwhelming. It builds slowly. A few people at first, then more, each carrying their own purpose, their own destination, their own quiet story. There is a gentle awareness among them, even if unspoken. People recognize the patterns of those around them. The same faces appear at similar times. The same paths are walked. Over time, these repeated encounters create a sense of familiarity that does not require conversation. A nod may be enough, a brief glance, a shared understanding that this is a space inhabited together. Work in many ways defines the structure of the day. For some, it begins immediately upon stepping outside. Tasks are clear, movements are practiced. A person might carry tools, adjust their clothing, or walk with a steady pace toward a known location. There is no need for urgency. The day stretches ahead, offering time enough to complete what must be done. For others, the morning includes a quieter preparation. Shops are opened slowly, with care taken in arranging items for display. Doors are swept, surfaces are wiped. Goods are placed where they can be seen, though not in excess. There is an understanding that business will come, not through loud calls or sudden bursts of activity, but through steady presence. The city does not demand attention, it invites participation. As the morning progresses, interactions begin to take shape. A customer enters a shop. A brief exchange occurs. Words are few, but meaningful. Transactions are not rushed. There is time to consider, to observe, to respond. These moments, though small, contribute to a sense of connection that runs quietly through the city. In the streets, movement continues at a measured pace. People walk with intention, but without haste. Carts pass by, their wheels turning steadily, carrying goods from one place to another. Horses move with calm strength, guided gently by those who understand their rhythm. The sounds of these movements blend together, forming a soft background that is neither loud nor distracting, but constant. Midday brings a subtle shift. The light becomes brighter, more direct. Shadows shorten. The pace of activity reaches its natural peak, though it never feels overwhelming. This is a time when many are fully engaged in their work, focused on tasks that require attention and care. There is a quiet concentration in the air, a sense that each person is contributing to the ongoing function of the city in their own way. Meals, when they occur, are often simple. They are not elaborate gatherings, but brief moments of pause within the day. A piece of bread, a small portion of food prepared earlier. These moments are less about indulgence and more about sustenance, providing the energy needed to continue. Sometimes they are shared. Sometimes they are taken alone. In either case, they offer a brief stillness before the rhythm resumes. Afternoon unfolds gradually, without sudden change. The same patterns continue, though there may be a slight softening in pace as the day begins to lean toward its later hours. Some tasks are completed, others continue. People adjust their movements subtly, guided by experience rather than strict schedules. There is a quiet flexibility in how time is used, an understanding that not everything must be rushed to completion. Children, when present in the streets, bring a different kind of energy. Their movements are less structured, more fluid. They observe, explore, and interact with the environment in ways that feel lighter. Their presence adds a layer of liveliness to the city, though even this remains gentle, never overwhelming the overall calm. They are part of the rhythm, but not bound by it in the same way as adults. As the day moves closer to evening, there is a noticeable transition. Work begins to conclude. Shops prepare to close. Tools are set aside. The movement of the streets shifts from outward activity to a gradual return inward. People begin to make their way back to their homes, retracing paths that have been walked many times before. This return carries a different feeling than the morning departure. It is quieter, more reflective. There is a sense of completion, even if the day has been simple. Each person carries with them the experiences of the day, small interactions, tasks accomplished, moments observed. These are not dramatic, but they are meaningful in their repetition. Evening within the home is often a time of calm. Light from candles or lamps fills the space softly. Conversations, if they occur, are gentle. Meals may be shared, though again, they are simple. There is no urgency now. The pace has slowed. The city, though still alive, has shifted into a quieter rhythm. Outside, the streets reflect this change. Movement continues, but it is less frequent. Sounds are softer. The city does not fall silent, but it becomes more subdued, as though preparing itself for rest. The air feels different, cooler perhaps, carrying with it the subtle traces of the day that has passed. Within this daily cycle, there is a sense of balance. Not perfect balance, but a natural one. Activity and rest. Movement and stillness. Work and quiet reflection. These elements repeat day after day, creating a structure that supports life in a way that feels steady and enduring. And yet, within this repetition, there is also variation. No 2 days are exactly the same. Small differences appear, an unexpected encounter, a slight change in weather, a new face in the street. These variations add texture to the routine, preventing it from becoming entirely predictable. They remind those who live here that even within familiarity, there is always something new to notice. Perhaps this is one of the most subtle aspects of life in New York during this time. The ability to find continuity without losing awareness of change, to move through familiar routines while still noticing the details that make each day unique. It is a quiet skill developed over time, shaped by the environment and the pace of life itself. And as this rhythm continues, gently and without interruption, it forms the foundation upon which the city grows. Not through sudden transformation, but through the steady accumulation of lived experience. Each morning begins, each day unfolds, each evening settles, and in between, life continues, quietly, steadily, and with a calm persistence that shapes the city in ways both seen and unseen. As the gentle rhythm of daily life settles into place, the deeper structure of the city begins to reveal itself through work. Not hurried, not loud, but steady. Work in New York during the 1800s is not just a necessity. It is the quiet force that keeps the city moving forward, shaping its streets, its interactions, and its sense of purpose. In the early hours of the day, long before the streets reach their fullest activity, there are already signs of labor beginning. Near the docks, figures move with calm intention, preparing for the arrival or departure of ships. The harbor is never entirely still. Even in its quietest moments, there is a sense of anticipation, as though something is always about to happen. Wooden ships, worn yet dependable, rest against the piers. Their surfaces creak softly with the motion of the water. Ropes are adjusted. Cargo is checked. There is no shouting, only quiet coordination. Workers understand their roles, and their movements reflect a familiarity built over time. Goods arrive from distant places, barrels, crates, bundles wrapped carefully in cloth or rope. Each item carries a story, though that story often remains unspoken. Instead, the focus is on movement, on transfer, on ensuring that what has arrived continues its journey into the city. From the docks, this flow of goods begins to spread outward. Carts are loaded carefully, their wooden frames supporting the weight of trade. Horses stand patiently, their breath visible in the cool morning air. When they begin to move, it is with a steady, measured pace. There is no urgency, only continuity. The journey from the waterfront into the city is one that repeats again and again, forming a quiet link between the outside world and the growing urban space. Along the streets, small shops begin to open their doors. Each one is modest, narrow in width, simple in design. But within these spaces, an entire world of trade exists. Shelves hold carefully arranged goods, fabric, tools, food items, everyday necessities. Nothing excessive, nothing wasted. Everything has a purpose. Shopkeepers move slowly, thoughtfully. They adjust items, sweep the entrance, observe the street with a calm attentiveness. There is no need to call out loudly or compete for attention. The city itself brings people to them. Customers arrive gradually. A person steps inside, pauses, looks around. The interaction that follows is quiet. Words are exchanged softly. Choices are made without pressure. There is time here, time to consider, time to observe, time to complete even the simplest transaction with care. Trade, in this environment, feels less like an event and more like a continuation of daily life. There are also those whose work does not take place within a shop, but in open spaces where the boundaries between labor and environment are less defined. In markets, for example, there is a gentle gathering of activity, not crowded in the modern sense, but alive with presence. Stalls are set up with intention, each offering something different: fresh produce, simple goods, items brought from nearby or from far away. The arrangement is not elaborate, but it is thoughtful. Voices here are slightly more frequent, though still calm. A seller speaks to a passerby. A buyer asks a question. There is movement, but it flows rather than rushes. People move from one stall to another, not hurried, but curious. The market becomes a space not only for exchange, but for observation. One can notice the subtle differences in goods, the variation in quality, the quiet negotiation that takes place through conversation and gesture. It is a place where the city feels connected, where different parts of daily life intersect in a shared space. Beyond these more visible forms of trade, there are countless other kinds of work unfolding quietly throughout the city. Artisans labor in small workshops, often attached to their homes or tucked into corners of the street. The sound of their work is soft but steady. The shaping of materials, the careful construction of objects meant to last. These are not mass-produced items. Each one carries the mark of the hands that created it. There is patience in this kind of work, a rhythm that is slower, more deliberate. Time is measured not in minutes, but in progress. Nearby, others engage in forms of labor that are more physical, though no less measured. Construction, for example, is an ongoing presence in a city that is still growing. New buildings rise gradually, not all at once, but piece by piece. Workers move materials into place, guided by experience and quiet coordination. The sound of construction is not overwhelming. It blends into the background, a steady reminder that the city is changing, even if that change feels slow. There are also those whose work involves movement rather than place. Messengers, carriers, individuals tasked with delivering items or information from one location to another. Their paths weave through the city, connecting different spaces in subtle ways. They walk with purpose, but not with haste, navigating familiar routes with ease. In all of these forms of work, there is a shared quality, consistency, a sense that each task, no matter how small, contributes to something larger. The city depends on these efforts, though it does not announce that dependence loudly. It is understood quietly, through repetition and experience. As the day continues, the flow of work shifts, but does not stop. Midday may bring a brief pause for some, but for others, it is simply a continuation. Tasks overlap, roles intersect. A delivery arrives just as another is being prepared. A customer leaves as another enters. The rhythm remains steady even as the details change. There is also an awareness of time, though it is not governed by strict schedules. People sense the progression of the day through light, through habit, through the natural unfolding of their tasks. They know when to begin, when to continue, when to conclude. This understanding is not written down, it is felt. By the afternoon, there is a subtle easing, not a full stop, but a gentle shift in intensity. Some work begins to wind down. Certain tasks are completed. Others are left for the following day. There is no pressure to extend beyond what is reasonable. The rhythm allows for closure. Shops begin to prepare for evening. Goods are gathered. Doors are adjusted. The presence that filled the space throughout the day begins to withdraw slightly, though it never fully disappears. Near the docks, activity may continue a little longer. Ships do not always arrive according to the same rhythm as the rest of the city. Their schedules are shaped by distance, by weather, by conditions beyond immediate control. And so, those who work near the water remain attentive, ready to respond as needed. But even here, there is calm, a steady acceptance of the pace at which things happen. As evening approaches, the sounds of work begin to soften across the city. Tools are set aside, movements slow, conversations become quieter. There is a natural transition from effort to rest, from outward activity to inward reflection. And within this transition, there is a sense of quiet satisfaction, not necessarily in grand achievements, but in the simple completion of what needed to be done. Work in the time and place is not separate from life. It is woven into it. It shapes the structure of the day, the flow of movement, the connections between people. It provides stability, even as the city itself continues to grow and change. And perhaps, as the light fades and the streets begin to quiet, there is a moment, brief but noticeable, when the city seems to pause. Not fully, not completely, but just enough to acknowledge the effort that has passed, the goods moved, the tasks completed, the quiet exchanges that have taken place. All of it contributing in small and steady ways to the life of a city that continues to build itself, not through sudden transformation, but through the calm persistence of those who work within it. And as this awareness settles gently, like the soft dimming of evening light, it opens the way for another question to emerge. Where do these workers return at the end of the day? What kind of spaces hold their rest, their quiet moments, their private lives? Beyond the streets and the labor, there are homes, spaces of stillness, places where the rhythm changes once again. As the sounds of work soften and the steady movement of the day begins to settle, the city gently turns inward. The streets, though never entirely empty, begin to release their hold on the people who have filled them since morning. One by one, individuals make their way back to the places they call home. These homes are not grand or expansive for most, but they hold a quiet importance that cannot be measured by size or design. They are places of pause, places where the rhythm of the city shifts into something softer, more personal, and deeply human. Homes in New York during the 1800s vary in form, but many share a sense of closeness, both in their structure and in their proximity to one another. Buildings often stand side by side, their walls nearly touching, forming narrow rows that stretch along the streets. From the outside, they appear modest. A simple door, a few windows, a structure that blends into the surrounding environment rather than standing apart from it. Inside, the space is often limited. Rooms are small, sometimes serving multiple purposes throughout the day. A single area might be used for cooking, eating, and resting, depending on the time and need. Furniture is practical rather than decorative. A table, a few chairs, a bed placed carefully within the available space. Each item is chosen for use, not display. And yet, within these modest surroundings, there is a quiet sense of care. Objects are arranged thoughtfully. Surfaces are kept as orderly as possible. Even in limited space, there is an effort to create a sense of comfort, however simple that comfort may be. A cloth placed neatly over a table. A small item positioned near a window to catch the light. These details, though subtle, reflect the human desire to shape one's environment into something that feels like home. Light plays an important role in these spaces. During the day, it enters through small windows, often filtered by thin curtains, or the angle of nearby buildings. It does not flood the room, but it touches it gently, illuminating certain areas while leaving others in soft shadow. The shifting light marks the passage of time within the home, guiding activities without the need for precise measurement. In the evening, the light changes. Candles or simple lamps are lit, casting a warm, flickering glow that fills the room with a sense of calm. Shadows move along the walls. The space feels smaller, but also more intimate. The outside world fades slightly, replaced by the quiet presence of the interior. Families, when present, gather within these spaces, not always in conversation, but in shared presence. A meal may be prepared and eaten slowly. It is often simple: bread, perhaps a stew, something made from what is available. The act of eating together is less about abundance and more about continuity, a daily ritual that provides both nourishment and a moment of connection. Conversations, if they occur, are gentle. They are not loud or hurried, but soft and measured, shaped by the calm of the evening. Topics may be practical, reflecting the events of the day, or reflective, touching on small observations and quiet thoughts. Sometimes there is silence, but it is not uncomfortable. It is a shared stillness, a pause between the movements of the day and the rest that will follow. In some homes, there may be only one or two occupants. Their routines are quieter still. A single person preparing a meal, sitting near a window, observing the fading light. These moments carry a different kind of stillness, one that is solitary but not empty. There is a sense of presence, of being within a space that holds familiarity and memory. Beyond the individual homes, there are entire neighborhoods shaped by these patterns of living. Each area carries its own subtle character, influenced by the people who reside there. Some streets feel slightly more crowded, with homes filled to their capacity. Others are quieter, with a bit more space between each dwelling. The differences are not dramatic, but they are noticeable over time. In denser areas, the closeness of living creates a shared atmosphere. Sounds travel easily from one home to another. The faint echo of conversation, the movement of footsteps above or below, the creak of a door. These sounds are part of the environment, neither intrusive nor entirely private. They create a sense that life is unfolding not in isolation, but alongside others. This closeness can feel both comforting and complex. It brings a sense of community, an awareness of others who share the same space and rhythm. At the same time, it leaves little room for solitude beyond the boundaries of one's own thoughts. And so, people learn to navigate this balance, finding moments of quiet within a shared environment. Ventilation and air within these homes are shaped by the structures themselves. Windows may be opened when weather allows, letting in fresh air from the streets. This air carries with it the subtle sense of the city, the faint trace of smoke, the distant presence of the harbour, the earthy tone of wood and ground. These elements blend together, creating an atmosphere that is both familiar and ever-changing. Temperature shifts with the seasons. In colder months, warmth is maintained through small fires or stoves, tended carefully to conserve fuel. The heat is not evenly distributed, and so people gather closer to its source, adjusting their movements to remain comfortable. In warmer months, windows are opened more frequently and the air circulates more freely, though it still carries the presence of the surrounding city. Storage within these homes is minimal. Items are kept close, often within reach, arranged in ways that maximize the limited space. There is an understanding of what is necessary and what is not. Possessions are few, but they are valued for their usefulness and their place within daily life. Children, when present, adapt naturally to these environments. They move within the space with ease, learning its boundaries and rhythms without instruction. Their activities are simple, shaped by what is available. They observe the routines of adults, gradually understanding the patterns that define their surroundings. As night deepens, the city quiets further. Within the homes, preparations for rest begin. Candles are extinguished one by one. The flickering light fades, leaving behind a softer darkness. Outside, the occasional sound still drifts through the streets, but it is distant, subdued. Rest is not immediate. There is often a transition, a period of stillness before sleep, a moment of reflection perhaps, though not always consciously. The body settles, the mind slows. The day, with all its small movements and interactions, begins to fade into memory. And then, gradually, sleep arrives, not as an abrupt shift, but as a gentle descent into quiet. Within these homes, scattered across the city, this pattern repeats night after night. Each space holds its own variations, its own unique arrangements and experiences, but the overall rhythm remains consistent. Living in New York during the 1800s is not defined by luxury or excess for most. It is defined by adaptation, by the ability to create comfort within limited space, by the quiet persistence of routines that bring structure to each day. And within these modest homes, something deeply important takes place, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily. They provide a place where the outside world can be set aside, even if only briefly. A place where the rhythm of the city softens. A place where individuals and families can exist, not as workers or participants in the larger system, but simply as themselves. And as the night continues, and the city rests in its own quiet way, another layer of life begins to reveal itself. Because these homes do not exist in isolation. They are part of a larger, more diverse community. A city shaped not only by its structures and routines, but by the many different people who arrive, settle, and bring with them new ways of living, different languages, different traditions, different stories, all slowly weaving together into the fabric of a place that is still becoming. As the city continues its slow and steady expansion, another layer of life begins to unfold, one that is shaped not by buildings or routines alone, but by the quiet arrival of people from distant places. New York in the 1800s is not a single story. It is a collection of many stories, each carried across oceans, across landscapes, and into the narrow streets where they begin to settle and take root. The harbour, which earlier seemed like a place of steady trade, also serves as a quiet threshold between worlds. Ships arrive not only with goods, but with people, individuals and families who step onto the docks with a mixture of uncertainty and quiet hope. Their journeys have been long, often marked by discomfort and waiting, and yet their arrival does not feel dramatic. It is subdued, a careful step from one life into another. They carry little with them, a small bundle, a few possessions, sometimes only what can be held in their hands. But what they bring cannot be seen so easily. Languages that sound unfamiliar to the ear, traditions shaped by distant lands, memories of places left behind. These elements move gently into the city, not all at once, but gradually, like threads being woven into an already existing fabric. At first, these new arrivals often settle in areas where others from similar backgrounds have already begun to gather, not through formal planning, but through quiet connection, a familiar word heard in the street, a shared way of preparing food, a subtle recognition that creates a sense of belonging. Even in a place that is still unfamiliar, these neighborhoods begin to form slowly. They are not marked by signs or boundaries, but by presence. A cluster of homes where a particular language is spoken more often. A street where certain customs are more visible. Over time, these subtle patterns create distinct areas within the city, each carrying its own quiet identity. Walking through these neighborhoods, one might notice small differences. The sounds of conversation shift slightly. The rhythm of speech changes. Words rise and fall in unfamiliar patterns, blending softly with the more common tones of the city. It does not create division. Instead, it adds depth, a layering of voices that makes the city feel more complex, more alive. Food, too, becomes a gentle expression of this diversity. Though many meals remain simple due to necessity, there are subtle variations in preparation and ingredients. A certain spice used here, a different method of cooking there. These differences are not always visible from the outside, but they exist within homes, shaping daily life in quiet ways. In markets, these influences begin to appear more clearly. New items are introduced alongside familiar ones. Sellers offer goods that reflect their own backgrounds, even if only in small quantities. Over time, these additions become part of the city's broader exchange, blending into the everyday flow of trade. There is no sudden transformation, only gradual integration. People observe, they adapt, they learn from one another, often without realizing it. Work, as always, plays a central role in this process. New arrivals find their place within the existing structure of labor, taking on roles that are available, often demanding, but steady. They move through the same streets, follow similar routines, and contribute to the same quiet rhythm that defines the city. At times, this adjustment is not easy. There are differences to navigate, expectations to understand, a need to find balance between what has been brought from the past and what is required in the present. But this process unfolds slowly, shaped by daily experience rather than sudden change. Over time, familiarity begins to grow. A shopkeeper recognizes a regular customer, even if their language differs. A neighbor becomes accustomed to the sounds coming from the home next door. Small gestures of understanding take place, simple acknowledgements that build connection without the need for elaborate expression. Children often move between these worlds with ease. They hear multiple languages. They observe different customs. They adapt quickly, blending influences in a way that feels natural to them. In their presence, the boundaries between cultures soften, becoming less defined and more fluid. The city, in this way, becomes a place of quiet exchange, not only of goods, but of ideas, habits, and ways of living. This exchange does not happen loudly. It happens in passing conversations, in shared spaces, in the gradual observation of others. And as it continues, it shapes the identity of New York in subtle but lasting ways. Religious practices also find their place within the city, though often in modest forms. Small gatherings take place within homes or simple structures. Traditions are maintained as best as possible, adapted to the available space and resources. These practices offer a sense of continuity, a connection to something familiar in an otherwise changing environment. There is comfort in this, a quiet reassurance that not everything has been left behind. At the same time, these traditions exist alongside others, creating a landscape of varied beliefs and practices that coexist within the same city. There is no single dominant expression in these smaller spaces. Instead, there is a gentle coexistence, shaped by proximity and necessity. Language remains one of the most noticeable elements of this diversity. In the streets, different words drift through the air, sometimes understood, sometimes not. But even when meaning is unclear, the tone carries emotion, intention, presence. Communication does not rely solely on shared vocabulary, but on gesture, expression, and the simple act of being present with one another. Over time, a blending begins to occur. Words are borrowed, phrases are adapted. A shared way of speaking emerges slowly, influenced by many sources. This evolving language reflects the city itself, dynamic, layered, and constantly in motion. Despite these variations, there is also a shared experience that unites those who live here. The rhythm of the day, the structure of work, the quiet return home in the evening. These patterns create a sense of common ground, a foundation upon which differences can exist without overwhelming the whole. The city does not ask people to become the same. It allows them to remain distinct while still participating in a shared environment. And perhaps this is one of its most subtle strengths, the ability to hold many identities at once without forcing them into a single form. As the years pass, these diverse influences continue to shape the city. New arrivals come. Others settle more deeply. Communities grow, shift, and adapt. The process is ongoing, never fully complete. There is always another story arriving, another thread being added to the tapestry. And yet, the overall rhythm remains steady. Morning light still touches the streets in the same gentle way. Work continues with quiet persistence. Homes offer their small spaces of rest. The presence of diversity does not disrupt this rhythm. It enriches it, adds texture, creates depth. And as the city continues to expand, both physically and socially, another transformation begins to take shape. Movement itself becomes more complex. Distances grow longer. Connections extend further. The need to move not just within small areas, but across larger parts of the city becomes more apparent. The question begins to emerge, softly and without urgency. How do people travel through a city that is no longer small? How do they connect distant places within an environment that is still growing? These questions lead gently into the next layer of life. The ways in which people move, the paths they follow, and the quiet expansion of a city reaching beyond its earlier boundaries. As New York continues its quiet growth, the idea of distance begins to change. What was once a compact settlement, easily crossed on foot, slowly stretches outward, reaching further into the island and beyond. This expansion does not happen suddenly. It unfolds gradually, almost gently, as more people arrive, more buildings appear, and more connections are needed between places that were once close, but now feel slightly farther apart. Movement, which once required only a short walk along familiar streets, begins to take on new forms. Walking remains the most common way to travel. It is simple, reliable, a steady rhythm of steps connecting one part of the city to another. People know their routes well. They understand where the ground is smooth and where it becomes uneven. They recognize the subtle changes in each street, the turn that leads toward the market, the narrow path that opens into a quieter neighborhood, the familiar corner where people often pass at the same time each day. But as the city stretches, walking alone is not always enough. There are places now that feel just beyond comfortable reach, especially for those who must carry goods, tools, or supplies. And so, other forms of movement begin to take shape, quietly integrating into the daily rhythm. Horse-drawn carts are among the most noticeable. They move at a steady pace, neither fast nor slow, guided carefully along the streets. Their wooden wheels turn with a soft, rhythmic sound, pressing into the ground or rolling over stone. The horses themselves move with calm strength, accustomed to their role within the city's flow. These carts serve many purposes. Some carry goods from the docks to shops and markets. Others transport materials needed for construction, supporting the steady growth of the city's structures. A few are used to carry people, though this is less common and often reserved for those who can afford such convenience. There is no rush in their movement. They follow the same rhythm as the rest of the city, measured, continuous, and predictable. As more people rely on these forms of transport, certain streets begin to adjust naturally. Paths that were once narrow and quiet become slightly more active, shaped by repeated use. The city, in its quiet way, adapts to the needs of movement, not through sudden redesign, but through gradual change. Alongside carts, there are also small carriages, offering a more personal form of travel. These are not used by everyone, but they are present, moving gently through the streets, carrying individuals from one place to another. The sound of hooves against the ground becomes part of the city's background, blending with footsteps and voices in a soft, continuous pattern. Near the waterfront, movement takes on a different character. Boats glide across the water, connecting different parts of the harbor and nearby areas. The motion is smooth, guided by currents and careful handling. For those who live or work near the water, this form of travel feels natural, an extension of the environment rather than something separate from it. The harbor itself remains a central point of connection. It is not only a place of arrival, but a place of transition. Goods move through it. People pass across it. Information travels along its routes. It links the city to places beyond its immediate reach, extending its presence outward into a wider world. As the city grows northward, new paths begin to form. Areas that were once open land gradually become part of the urban landscape. Houses appear, roads extend. The boundaries of the city shift, not with clear lines, but with a soft expansion that follows the needs of its inhabitants. Travel between these newer areas and the older parts of the city becomes a regular part of daily life for some. A worker may walk from a more distant home toward the center of activity. A cart may carry goods along a longer route than before. These journeys take time, but time is understood differently here. It is not something to be minimized at all costs, but something that exists alongside movement. People plan accordingly. They begin their journeys earlier. They move at a steady pace. They accept the distance as part of their routine. There is a quiet patience in this, an understanding that the city is larger now, and that movement within it requires a different kind of awareness. Bridges, though not yet as numerous or expansive as they would later become, begin to play a role in connecting areas separated by water. Their presence is subtle but important, offering new pathways and possibilities for travel. Crossing them provides a different perspective, a brief moment where the city can be seen from a slight distance, its shape more visible, its growth more apparent. From these vantage points, one might notice how the city is no longer confined to a single cluster of streets. It spreads, gently, persistently, and with this spreading comes a new kind of experience. The feeling of moving through a space that is still becoming. Each journey, whether short or long, becomes part of this experience. Walking through familiar streets, one might notice small changes. A new building where there was once open space, a different path forming where many feet have passed. These observations are subtle, but they accumulate over time, shaping one's understanding of the city. Movement is not just about reaching a destination. It is about observing the gradual transformation of the environment. For those who travel regularly, these changes become part of their awareness, even if they are not always consciously noted. There is also a sense of connection created through movement. Paths overlap, routes intersect. People who may not know each other still share the same spaces, crossing paths at different times, forming a quiet network of presence within the city. This network is not visible in a formal way. It exists through repetition, through familiarity, through the shared experience of moving through the same environment. As evening approaches, movement slows once again. Carts return. Horses are led back to their resting places. Individuals make their way home along routes that have become deeply familiar. The city, which expanded outward during the day, gently contracts inward as people return to their personal spaces. The streets grow quieter. The sound of movement becomes softer, less frequent, but it never fully disappears. Even in the stillness of night, there are occasional footsteps, a distant cart, a quiet reminder that the city continues to exist, even at rest. And within this ongoing flow of movement, another layer of life begins to take shape, because not all who move through the city experience it in the same way. Some travel with ease, others with effort. Some have access to comfort and convenience. Others rely only on their own steady steps. These differences, though subtle at times, begin to form patterns. Patterns that reflect something deeper within the structure of the city. A quiet variation in experience. A gentle but noticeable distinction in how life is lived from one person to another. And as these patterns become more apparent, they lead into another question. one that rests quietly beneath the surface of daily life. How did different people experience this growing city? What shapes their opportunities, their routines, and their sense of place within it? The answers to these questions unfold slowly, just like the city itself, through observation, through contrast, through the quiet recognition that even within a shared environment, life can feel very different depending on where one stands. Section 8. Quiet divides, gentle contrasts. The shape of social life. As the city continues its steady expansion, a subtle pattern begins to emerge within its daily rhythm. It is not immediately visible, nor is it loudly expressed, but it exists quietly beneath the surface of ordinary life. This pattern is shaped by differences in work, in living conditions, in opportunity, and over time, it begins to influence how people experience the city around them. New York in the 1800s is not a place of uniform experience. Though its streets are shared and its rhythms often overlap, the way individuals move through this environment can vary gently, yet meaningfully. These differences are not always spoken of directly. Instead, they are observed in small details, in the spaces people occupy, and in the pace at which their days unfold. In certain parts of the city, homes feel slightly more spacious, not grand in the modern sense, but offering a bit more room to breathe. Windows may be larger. Interiors may hold a few additional furnishings. Light enters more freely, and there is a sense of openness that contrasts gently with the tighter, more crowded areas nearby. Those who live in such spaces often experience a slightly different rhythm. Their mornings may begin with a little more ease. Their work, though still present, may be less physically demanding, or at least less constant. There is time, perhaps, for small pauses, moments to observe rather than simply move from one task to another. In these quieter neighborhoods, the streets themselves reflect this difference. They are often less crowded. Movement is slower, more spaced out. The sounds of carts and footsteps are still present, but they do not overlap as densely. There is a calmness that feels slightly removed from the more active parts of the city. Yet even here, life remains simple. There is no excess, no overwhelming display of wealth or comfort. Instead, there is a subtle distinction, a difference in degree rather than kind, a slightly easier pace, a slightly greater sense of space. In contrast, other areas of the city feel more tightly woven together. Homes stand closer. Rooms hold more people. The sounds of daily life overlap continuously. Voices, footsteps, the movement of objects within small spaces. Here, the rhythm is more compact, more concentrated. There is less separation between individuals and more shared experience, whether intentional or not. Daily routines in these areas are shaped by necessity. Work begins early and continues steadily. There is little room for pause, not because it is avoided, but because it is not always possible. Tasks must be completed. Time must be used carefully. The rhythm is not rushed, but it is persistent. And yet, within this closeness, there is also a different kind of connection. Neighbors become familiar not through formal introductions, but through shared presence. The sounds of life blend together, creating a sense that no one is entirely alone, even within the limits of their own space. This closeness can feel comforting at times, and at other times it may feel limiting, but it is always present. Between these different environments, the city forms a quiet spectrum, not divided by clear boundaries, but by gradual transitions. One street may feel slightly more open, the next slightly more dense. Over time, these small shifts accumulate, shaping the way people move, interact, and understand their place within the city. Work plays a significant role in these differences. Those with access to certain types of work, trade ownership, skilled crafts, or roles that involve coordination rather than constant labor, may find their days structured differently. Their movements are still guided by routine, but with a bit more flexibility, a bit more space between tasks. Others, whose work requires steady physical effort, experience the day in a more continuous flow. There is less separation between beginning and end, more emphasis on endurance and consistency. Their routines are no less important, but they carry a different weight, a different texture. These variations influence not only the structure of the day, but also the experience of time itself. For some, time may feel like something that can be shaped, adjusted, or paused briefly. For others, it moves in a more fixed pattern, guided by the demands of work and necessity. Even in moments of rest, these differences can be felt. An evening in a slightly larger home may allow for a quiet activity, a moment of reading perhaps, or simply sitting in stillness. In a more crowded space, rest may take on a different form, shaped by the presence of others, by shared sounds, by the constant awareness of proximity. And yet, despite these contrasts, there is also a shared foundation that connects all who live in the city. The same morning light touches every street. The same patterns of work and return shape the day. The same sense of gradual change moves quietly through the environment. No one exists entirely separate from the city's overall rhythm. Differences are present, but they do not isolate completely. Instead, they create a layered experience where multiple ways of living exist side by side, sometimes intersecting, sometimes remaining parallel. Public spaces, such as markets and streets, serve as points of gentle connection between these layers. Here, people from different parts of the city come into contact, even if only briefly. A purchase is made. A path is crossed. A glance is exchanged. These moments are small, but they create a sense of shared presence that extends beyond individual circumstances. In these interactions, there is often no overt acknowledgement of difference. Instead, there is a quiet coexistence, an understanding that each person carries their own routine, their own responsibilities, their own place within the larger whole. Over time, these patterns become part of the city's identity, not as divisions, but as variations, a recognition that life here can be experienced in many ways, all contributing to the same evolving environment. There is also an awareness, subtle but present, that movement between these layers is possible, though not always easy. A person may change their circumstances over time, adjusting their work, their living conditions, their daily experience. These changes do not happen quickly, but they are part of the city's ongoing story, a quiet possibility that exists alongside the more immediate realities of each day. As evening settles once again, these differences soften slightly. The city quiets, the pace slows. The outward signs of variation become less visible in the dimming light. What remains is the shared experience of rest, of retreat, of the gradual closing of the day. Candles are lit across many homes, regardless of size or location. The same warm glow appears in windows along different streets, creating a sense of unity that gently overlays the distinctions of the day. And in this softened light, the city feels whole, not because differences have disappeared, but because they have settled into a quiet balance. A balance that allows the city to function, to grow, and to continue shaping itself through the lives of those who inhabit it. Yet beneath this balance, there are challenges that cannot be ignored. Difficulties that arise from crowded spaces, demanding work, and the ongoing process of adaptation. These challenges are not always visible at first glance, but they exist within the structure of daily life, shaping experiences in ways both subtle and significant. And as the city continues to evolve, these struggles begin to surface more clearly, not as dramatic disruptions, but as quiet pressures that require resilience, patience, and the ability to adapt. It is within these moments that the deeper story of the city begins to emerge. A story not only of growth, but of endurance, of individuals learning, slowly and steadily, how to live within a place that is constantly changing. As the city continues its slow and steady transformation, there are aspects of life that remain less visible, though they shape the experience of living here in profound ways. Beneath the calm rhythm of daily routines, beneath the steady flow of work and movement, there are quiet challenges that individuals face. Challenges that do not always announce themselves loudly, but instead settle gently into the fabric of everyday life. These struggles are not always dramatic. They often appear in small, persistent forms. A room that feels just a little too crowded. A day of work that stretches slightly longer than expected. A change in weather that shifts the balance of comfort within a home. Each of these moments taken alone may seem minor, but over time they accumulate, shaping the way people move, think, and adapt within the city. In more densely populated areas, space becomes a constant consideration. Homes, already modest in size, must accommodate multiple individuals, sometimes more than they were originally intended to hold. Movement within these spaces requires awareness, an understanding of where others are, how to share limited room, how to create moments of privacy within a setting that offers little separation. This closeness can feel warm at times, a reminder that one is not alone. But it can also feel heavy, especially when the need for quiet or solitude arises. And so, people learn to adapt. They find small ways to create personal space, perhaps through routine, through timing, or through simple habits that offer brief moments of stillness within a shared environment. Work, too, brings its own quiet demands. Days are structured around tasks that require consistency and effort. For many, there is little variation in the type of work performed, and while this creates familiarity, it can also lead to a sense of repetition that feels both steady and unchanging. There is endurance in this, a quiet strength in the ability to continue day after day without the need for constant change or excitement. But there are also moments when the body feels the weight of this repetition, when rest becomes not just a pause but a necessity. And yet, even within these demands, there is a rhythm that provides balance. Work begins, it continues, it concludes. And within that structure, individuals find ways to manage their energy, their time, and their expectations. The environment itself can also present subtle challenges. Weather shifts are felt more directly in homes that offer limited insulation or protection. Cold seasons require careful management of warmth, fires tended with attention, fuel used sparingly. Warm seasons bring their own adjustments, as air moves differently through narrow streets and tightly packed buildings. These are not unexpected difficulties. They are part of life. And over time, people develop an intuitive understanding of how to respond to them. Clothing is adjusted. Windows are opened or closed at the right moments. Daily routines shift slightly to accommodate the conditions of the day. There is a quiet adaptability in these actions, a willingness to adjust rather than resist. Health, though not always spoken of openly, is another aspect shaped by the conditions of the city. Close living quarters, shared spaces, and the steady flow of people create an environment where well-being must be maintained with care. Cleanliness becomes important, though not always easy to achieve in limited space. Fresh air, when available, is valued. Small habits, washing, airing out rooms, maintaining order, become part of daily life, not as formal practices, but as quiet efforts to preserve comfort. There are times when illness may pass through a household or a neighborhood, when routines are disrupted, when rest becomes more important than work. These moments are handled with the same calm persistence that defines other aspects of life. There is concern, of course, but it is expressed quietly, through care, through patience, through the gradual return to normal rhythm. The city itself does not stop, but within individual spaces, there are pauses, moments of recovery, moments where the usual patterns soften to allow for healing. Economic uncertainty is another presence, though often unspoken. Work, while steady, is not always guaranteed. There are days when opportunities may feel less certain, when the flow of goods or demand for services shifts slightly. These changes are not always predictable, and so individuals learn to navigate them with caution and awareness. Savings, when possible, are modest. Resources are used carefully. There is an understanding that stability is something to be maintained, not assumed. And within this understanding there is a quiet resilience, a readiness to adjust, to find alternatives, to continue moving forward even when conditions change. Social differences, which were earlier observed in subtle contrasts of space and routine, can also influence how these challenges are experienced. Those with slightly more resources may find certain difficulties easier to manage. More space, more flexibility, a bit more comfort during times of strain. Others may face greater limitations, requiring a deeper level of adaptation. But regardless of these differences, there is a shared experience of living within a city that is still evolving. A shared need to respond to change, to adjust to circumstances, to find balance within an environment that does not remain entirely constant. Community, in its quiet form, often plays a role in this adaptation. Neighbors observe one another. They notice when routines shift, when someone is absent from their usual path, when a small need arises. Assistance, when given, is often simple and unspoken. A shared resource, a brief moment of help, a quiet acknowledgement that life here is not entirely solitary. These interactions are not formal. They do not draw attention, but they contribute to a sense of connection that helps ease the weight of daily challenges. As time passes, individuals become more familiar with the patterns of the city, not only its rhythms of work and movement, but also its moments of difficulty. They learn what to expect. They learn how to respond. They develop a kind of steady awareness that allows them to move through both ease and hardship with a calm persistence. And perhaps this is where the deeper story of New York in the 1800s begins to take shape, not only in its growth, not only in its expansion, but in the quiet strength of the people who live within it. a strength that is not loud or dramatic, but steady, a strength that appears in small actions repeated over time, in the ability to continue, to adapt, to find balance even when conditions are not ideal. As evening returns once again, and the city softens into its familiar quiet, these experiences settle into the background. They do not disappear. They remain, gently shaping the way life unfolds. And yet, within this ongoing cycle, there is also something else, a gradual sense of progress, a recognition, subtle but present, that despite challenges, the city continues to grow, to change, to move forward. And within that movement lies a final reflection, a quiet consideration of what it all means, how a place transforms over time, how people adapt to that transformation, and how, through steady endurance, something lasting begins to emerge. As the city rests once more beneath the soft cover of night, there is a sense, gentle and almost unspoken, that something meaningful has taken place, not in a single day, but across many days layered together. New York in the 1800s is not defined by sudden transformation, but by gradual becoming. It is a place shaped not by one moment, but by countless small ones, each contributing quietly to a larger story. If one were to step back, just slightly, and observe the city as a whole, it might appear as a living pattern, not fixed, not complete, but always forming. Streets that once felt open now hold more movement. Buildings that once stood alone now sit among others. Paths that were rarely walked have become familiar roads. And within all of this, people continue their routines, often unaware of the full extent of the change taking place around them. There is something calming in this kind of growth. It does not demand attention. It does not overwhelm. It simply continues. Morning follows night. Work follows rest. Movement follows stillness. And through this steady repetition, the city expands, not only in space, but in identity. The individuals who live here are part of this process, though they may not think of it in such terms. They wake, they move, they work, they return home. Their actions are practical, necessary, and often focused on the immediate needs of the day. And yet, together, these actions create something larger than any single life. A shared environment, a collective rhythm, a city that exists because of them. There is a quiet beauty in this. The idea that a place can grow not through grand design alone, but through the steady presence of those who inhabit it. Each person contributes in their own way. A shopkeeper opening a door, a worker carrying goods, a family gathering in the evening. These moments are simple, but they are essential. They form the foundation of continuity, allowing the city to exist not just as a structure, but as a lived experience. Over time, this continuity creates a sense of familiarity. Streets become known, routines become reliable, faces, even if unnamed, become recognizable. And within this familiarity, there is comfort, a feeling that despite change, there is something stable to return to. And yet, change does continue, quietly, persistently. New people arrive, bringing with them different ways of living. Old buildings are replaced or adjusted. Paths shift, patterns evolve. The city does not resist this change. It absorbs it, integrates it, allows it to become part of the whole. This ability to adapt is perhaps one of its most defining qualities. Not a dramatic resilience, but a gentle one. A willingness to shift without losing its core rhythm. A capacity to hold both continuity and transformation at the same time. For those who live within it, this adaptation becomes part of their own experience. They learn to adjust, to find balance within shifting conditions, to carry forward their routines even as the environment around them evolves. There is a quiet strength in this, not the kind that draws attention, but the kind that endures, the kind that allows life to continue, even when circumstances change. And as the years pass, this strength becomes part of the city's character, not something that can be easily seen, but something that can be felt in the steady movement of the streets, in the calm persistence of work, in the simple act of returning home at the end of each day. There is also a deeper reflection that begins to emerge when one considers the passage of time, the realization that the city, as it exists in this moment, is only one version of itself, that it will continue to change, to grow, to become something else. The people who walk these streets now are part of that process, even if they do not see its full outcome. They are shaping a future they will not fully witness, just as those before them shaped the present they now inhabit. This continuity, stretching across time, creates a sense of connection that goes beyond individual experience, a reminder that places are not static. They are living, evolving expressions of human life, and within that evolution there is both uncertainty and possibility. But perhaps, in the quiet tone of this reflection, it is not the uncertainty that stands out most. It is the steadiness, the way in which life continues, regardless of change, the way people adapt, not through sudden shifts, but through small, consistent adjustments, the way a city can grow, not by abandoning what it was, but by building gently upon it. As night deepens, and the last lights in windows begin to fade, the city settles into a familiar stillness, not silent, but calm. The faint sounds that remain are soft and distant, a reminder that even in rest, the city continues to exist. And within this stillness, there is a sense of completion, not of an ending, but of a pause, a moment where everything that has unfolded, the routines, the work, the movement, the quiet struggles and adaptations, comes together in a gentle balance. Tomorrow will come, as it always does. The light will return. The streets will fill once more. The rhythm will begin again, and the city will continue its slow, steady journey forward, becoming, always becoming. And even as the city settles into that familiar stillness, there remain places where the rhythm does not fully fade, but simply softens into something more subtle. Beyond the main streets, beyond the paths most often walked during the day, there are quieter edges of New York, spaces that exist just out of immediate view, where life continues in gentler, less noticeable ways. Back alleys wind quietly between buildings, narrow and often shadowed even during daylight. At night, they take on a deeper stillness, shaped by the absence of direct light and the quiet presence of the structures that surround them. These alleys are not places of constant activity, but they are not empty either. They hold a different kind of movement, one that feels slower, more deliberate, and often unseen by those who remain along the main roads. The ground here is uneven, sometimes damp, carrying the traces of the day's passing. Small remnants of activity remain, a footprint, a faint mark left by a cartwheel, the quiet indication that life has passed through, even if only briefly. The air feels cooler, more enclosed, as though the space itself holds onto the night a little longer than the open streets. There are doors that open into these alleys, less visible than those facing the main roads. Through them, individuals move quietly, entering or leaving without drawing attention. These entrances connect to the private spaces of the city, offering pathways that are practical rather than prominent. They are part of the unseen structure that supports daily life, allowing movement to continue even when the visible world has grown still. Occasionally, a soft sound echoes here. A distant footstep, the gentle closing of a door, the faint rustle of movement within a nearby space. These sounds do not linger. They appear briefly, then dissolve into the quiet, leaving behind a sense of presence without disturbance. Near these alleys, small tasks continue even after the day has ended. Someone may step outside to tend to a minor chore, moving with care so as not to disrupt the surrounding calm. A container is adjusted, an item is set aside. These actions are simple, almost routine, yet they extend the life of the day just slightly beyond its visible conclusion. In certain corners of the city, night work continues quietly, not in the bustling sense of daytime labor, but in the softer forms. A baker may prepare for the next morning, working in the dim glow of a small light, shaping dough with steady hands. The movements are practiced, unhurried, guided by familiarity rather than urgency. The scent of bread, faint and warm, drift gently into the surrounding space, a quiet promise of the coming day. Elsewhere, a watchman moves slowly along a street, his presence calm and steady. He does not rush, nor does he seek attention. His role is one of quiet observation, ensuring that the stillness of the night remains undisturbed. His footsteps are measured, his awareness constant, though unobtrusive. The city at night is not empty. It is simply quieter. The larger movements of the day have faded, leaving behind a more delicate rhythm, one that exists in smaller gestures and softer sounds. Windows, which earlier glowed with the warm light of evening, begin to darken one by one. Inside, people settle into rest, their movements slowing until they are no longer visible from the outside. Curtains shift slightly. A final light dims. The boundary between the interior and exterior becomes more pronounced as the city turns inward. And yet, not all lights disappear at once. Here and there, a faint glow remains, marking a space where activity continues just a little longer. Perhaps someone remains awake, engaged in quiet thought or simple task. Perhaps a conversation extends gently into the night. These moments are not loud or hurried. They unfold slowly, carried by the calm of the hour. The streets themselves take on a different character under the night sky. Without the constant flow of movement, their shapes become more apparent. The curve of a path, the alignment of buildings, the way shadows gather along certain edges. The absence of daytime activity allows these details to emerge more clearly, offering a quieter perspective on the city's form. The sky above, often only partially visible during the day, feels more present now. Between rooftops, stars appear faintly, their light subtle but steady. They do not dominate the view, but they add a sense of depth, a reminder that the city exists within a larger world, one that continues beyond its boundaries. Time at night feels different. It stretches slightly. Moments linger longer than they do during the day. There is no urgency to move from one task to another, no need to maintain the steady pace that defines daylight hours. Instead, there is space for stillness, for quiet observation, for simply existing within the calm. In some neighborhoods, groups may gather briefly even at this late hour. Not in large numbers and not with loud voices, but in small, quiet interactions. A few words exchanged, a shared pause before returning indoors, These moments are fleeting, but they contribute to the sense that the city, even at rest, remains connected. Animals, too, move through these quieter spaces. A horse shifts gently in its place of rest. A small creature passes along the edge of an alley, unnoticed by most. These movements are part of the night's rhythm, subtle and natural, adding to the quiet continuity of life. As the night deepens further, the city reaches its most peaceful state. The sounds become fewer, the movements less frequent, the air still. And within this stillness, there is a sense of balance. Not an absence of life, but a pause within it. A moment where the activity of the day has settled, and the promise of the next day has not yet begun. It is in these quieter hours that the city reveals another aspect of itself. Not the busy streets or the active markets, but the spaces in between. The alleys, the dimly lit corners, the gentle movements that continue without attention. These are the parts of the city that are often overlooked, yet they are essential to its character. They provide space for transition, for quiet continuation, for the small, necessary actions that support the larger rhythm of life. And as the night slowly gives way to the earliest hints of morning, these spaces begin to shift once again. The stillness softens. A faint light appears along the horizon. The city prepares, almost imperceptibly, to begin again. But before that new rhythm fully takes hold, there is one final layer to consider. Not the physical spaces, not the routines or movements, but the inner experience of those who live within this city. Their thoughts, their hopes, their quiet reflections at the end of each day. Because beneath all that is seen and heard, there exists another world entirely. One that cannot be observed directly, but can be gently understood. As the city drifts through its quietest hours, when movement has softened, and the visible world rests in shadow, there is another kind of activity that continues, unseen yet deeply present. It exists not in the streets or along the docks, but within the minds of those who live here. In these still moments, when the day has ended and the next has not yet begun, people turn inward, carrying with them the quiet weight and wonder of their own thoughts. Life in New York during the 1800s is shaped not only by routine and environment, but by the inner worlds of its inhabitants, worlds filled with reflection, uncertainty, hope, and quiet ambition. These are not always spoken aloud. Often they remain unexpressed, held gently within the mind as part of the ongoing experience of living in a place that is constantly changing. For many, the city represents possibility, not in a loud or immediate way, but as a steady, underlying presence. The idea that something more might be found here, a different kind of life, a gradual improvement over time. These thoughts do not arrive as clear plans or bold declarations. They appear softly, often in the quiet hours when the mind has space to wander beyond the tasks of the day. A worker resting after long hours may think about the future in simple terms, perhaps not far ahead, but just beyond the present. A slightly better arrangement, a steadier form of work, a small change that could make daily life feel a little easier. These hopes are modest, yet they carry meaning. They provide direction, even if that direction is not always clearly defined. Others may reflect on the past, on places they once knew, on familiar landscapes, voices, and routines that now exist only in memory. These reflections are not always filled with longing. Sometimes they are simply a way of maintaining connection to what has been, even as life continues in a new environment. The city, in this sense, becomes a place of layered identity, where the past and present coexist within the individual, shaping how they move through each day. There is also a quiet awareness of uncertainty, the understanding that the future is not fixed, that circumstances can change, that stability, while possible, requires ongoing effort. This awareness does not always lead to worry. Instead, it often results in a careful approach to life, a tendency to observe, to adapt, to move forward with steady caution rather than sudden risk. Ambition, when it appears, is often gentle. It does not demand attention or immediate action. It grows slowly, shaped by experience. A shopkeeper may consider expanding their offerings not all at once, but gradually, as opportunity allows. An artisan may think about improving their craft, refining their work through quiet repetition. These ambitions are not separate from daily life. They are woven into it, developing alongside routine rather than disrupting it. For younger individuals, especially those growing up within the city, the sense of possibility can feel slightly different. They are more accustomed to the environment, less connected to distant pasts, and more attuned to the patterns of the present. Their thoughts may turn toward what lies ahead, not with certainty, but with curiosity. What will the city become? What place might they find within it? These questions do not always have clear answers, but they shape the way they observe the world around them. The movement of the streets, the changes in neighborhoods, the arrival of new people and ideas. All of these elements contribute to a growing awareness that the city is not static, and that their own lives are part of its ongoing transformation. There are also moments of quiet contentment, times when the simplicity of the day feels enough. A task completed, a meal shared, a moment of rest. These experiences, though small, provide a sense of balance, a reminder that life is not only about striving or adapting, but also about existing within the present moment. Even within crowded spaces or demanding routines, individuals find ways to experience these moments. A brief pause near a window, a quiet observation of the street below, a simple conversation that carries warmth without urgency. These are the spaces where the inner world and the outer environment meet, where thought and experience align, even if only briefly. At times, there may also be a sense of distance, not physical, but emotional. The feeling of being one part of a much larger whole, of moving through a city filled with countless others, each carrying their own thoughts, their own concerns, their own quiet hopes. This awareness can feel both humbling and isolating, a reminder that one is not alone, yet also not entirely connected to every other life unfolding nearby. And so, people navigate this balance in their own way. Some find comfort in routine, allowing the repetition of daily life to provide stability. Others seek small connections, brief interactions that offer a sense of shared presence. Still others turn inward more fully, finding meaning within their own reflections. There is no single way to experience the city. Each individual carries their own perspective, shaped by their circumstances, their history, and their quiet aspirations. Over time, these inner experiences contribute to the broader character of the city itself. Though unseen, they influence decisions, behaviors, and interactions. They shape how people respond to change, how they adapt to new conditions, how they continue even when the path ahead is not entirely clear. As the night deepens, these thoughts settle gently. They do not disappear, but they soften, making way for rest. Sleep, when it comes, offers a temporary release from the weight of reflection, a pause in the ongoing process of thinking, planning, remembering. And yet, even in sleep, the presence of these inner worlds remains quietly shaping the person who will wake again in the morning. When the first light returns, these thoughts will rise once more, not all at once, not with urgency, but gradually, as the day begins again. They will accompany each step, each task, each interaction. They will remain in the background, guiding, influencing, and quietly supporting the unfolding of life within the city. And as this pattern continues day after day, it becomes clear that the story of New York in the 1800s is not only a story of streets and buildings, of work and movement. It is also a story of inner experience, of thoughts that remain unspoken, of hopes that develop slowly, of individuals finding their place within a world that is always becoming something new. And within this understanding, there is one final reflection to consider, a broader perspective that extends beyond the present moment, a quiet contemplation of how these lives, these routines, these thoughts have shaped something lasting, something that continues far beyond the time in which they existed. As the final hours of night stretch gently toward morning, and the city rests in its most peaceful state, there is a sense that everything which has unfolded, the streets, the work, the homes, the quiet thoughts, exists not only in its own time, but as part of something much larger. Life in New York during the 1800s does not end within those years. It continues in subtle ways, shaping what comes after. If one listens carefully, beyond the soft rhythm of footsteps and distant wheels, there is a deeper echo, not a sound, but a presence. The echo of lives lived steadily, without urgency, yet full of quiet intention. It is within this echo that the future begins to take form. The city, as it was then, may appear small compared to what it will become, but its foundations are already in place, not just in brick and wood, not just in streets and pathways, but in the habits of living, in the ways people move, interact, and adapt to one another within shared space. These patterns do not disappear, they evolve. They extend forward in time, carried by those who continue to build, to arrive, to remain. A simple act, walking along a familiar path, opening a shop, sharing a quiet exchange. These are not isolated moments. They become part of a larger continuity, repeated and reshaped across generations. What begins as routine slowly transforms into tradition, and what is familiar in one era becomes the foundation for something new in the next. In this way, the city teaches a kind of quiet lesson. That growth does not require sudden change. That transformation can be gentle. That something vast can emerge from the accumulation of small, steady actions. The people who lived in New York during the 1800s did not see the full outcome of their presence. They could not fully imagine the scale the city would one day reach, the height of its buildings, the speed of its movement, the density of its population. And yet, their lives contributed to all of it. Each step they took shaped the ground that others would walk upon. Each decision they made influenced the structure of the city in ways they could not fully see. There is a quiet humility in this, a reminder that human life, while often focused on the present, is always part of a longer continuum. What is built today becomes the environment of tomorrow. What is practiced now becomes the habit of the future. And so, the calm routines of the past carry forward, even as the form of the city changes. The narrow streets may widen. The buildings may rise higher. The methods of work and movement may become faster, more complex. But beneath these visible transformations, the underlying rhythm remains. The need for connection, the structure of daily life, the balance between work and rest, the quiet presence of inner thought. These elements persist. They are not tied to a single era, but to the experience of living within a shared space. In reflecting on this, one begins to see the city not just as a place, but as a living expression of human connection, a place where individuals, each with their own lives and thoughts, come together to form something collective, not perfectly, not without challenge, but consistently, over time. There is also a sense that the city, in its early form, carries a kind of innocence, not in the sense of simplicity, but in the sense of openness, a willingness to grow without a fixed identity, a capacity to absorb change without losing its core. This openness allows it to become something more than its original shape, to expand beyond its early boundaries, to welcome new influences, new people, new ideas, and in doing so, it reflects something deeply human, the ability to adapt, to evolve, to continue moving forward even when the path is not entirely clear. As morning begins to approach once more, the first light returning softly to the edges of rooftops and streets, the city prepares to awaken again. The same patterns will repeat. Doors will open, steps will follow familiar paths, work will begin, and within that repetition, the quiet process of becoming will continue, unnoticed by many, but always present. It is in this gentle continuity that the true story of New York in the 1800s resides, not in grand events alone, not in moments of sudden change, but in the steady, ongoing experience of life lived day by day. A city rising not through force, but through persistence. A community forming not through design alone, but through shared presence. And individuals, each carrying their own quiet worlds, contributing to something far greater than themselves. As the light grows a little stronger and the first movements of a new day begin to emerge, there is a final sense of calm reflection that all of this, the streets, the homes, the work, the thoughts, has not been lost. It remains in the structure of the city, in the patterns of modern life, in the ways people continue to gather, to move, to live together within shared spaces. The past does not disappear. It softens, it settles, it becomes part of the foundation upon which the present stands. And perhaps in this understanding, there is a quiet comfort, a sense that even the simplest moments, the most ordinary routines, carry meaning beyond their immediate time, that they contribute in ways both seen and unseen to a larger story, a story that continues, always continuing, like the steady rhythm of footsteps along a quiet street, like the soft glow of light in a window at night, like the calm, enduring presence of a city that never fully stops becoming.